Welcome, fellow travelers. Today our adventures took a turn for the unexpected as some severe weather conditions derailed our original plans. So instead we're going to take a winter wander through downtown Victoria and explore some of the famous sights of British Columbia's capital city. Let's go explore. So Victoria is the capital of British Columbia, and it was founded in 1843 by the Hudson's Bay Company. Victoria lies on the southernmost tip of Vancouver Island on the Pacific coast, and usually it doesn't get this much snow, but today we're getting an extra helping. Victoria's inner harbor is the heart of the city, and this is the location where Fort Victoria once stood. The harbor is surrounded by a number of historic buildings, including the Fairmont Empress Hotel, the Royal BC Museum, and the BC Parliament buildings. Today the inner harbor is covered in snow, as are the boats that are moored here. And you can actually see that the snow's been heavy enough to create a slushy layer on top of the salt water. Heading just across the street, let's take a look at the Fairmont Empress Hotel. It was constructed in 1908 by the Canadian Pacific Railway and consists of 477 rooms. The Empress is a respectable upscale British property and has been host to a number of famous people. Back in 1939, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth attended a luncheon at the Empress during their tour of Canada. Queen Elizabeth II is also one of the famous guests that have stayed at the hotel. And even Shirley Temple stayed here while she was on hiatus from her regular work schedule in California. The building was designated as a National Historic Site for Canada in 1981 and has gone through some significant restorations in 2015 and 2017, costing more than $60 million. Here's Confederation Fountain. This was constructed in 1967 to commemorate the centennial of Canada's Confederation. Canada's coat of arms sits behind this fountain, and on either side are the shields of Canada's 13 provinces and territories. Beneath each one it shows the territory's name and the year it joined Canada. Also hidden away in this plaza is a time capsule buried in 1967 and won't be open again until January 1st, 2067 as part of Canada's bicentennial celebrations. Another of Victoria's stunning buildings are the BC Parliament buildings, which have been in use since 1898. Built just after Confederation, it was an impressive monument to BC's dedication to the newly formed country. The BC Parliament buildings are 500 feet long and consist of a central dome flanked by two end pavilions. Sitting atop the central dome is a figure of George Vancouver. The design of this structure was awarded to Francis Rattenbury, a young English immigrant who was only 25 years old. The success of this design led Rattenbury to work on the design of other famous buildings in British Columbia, including the design of the Empress Hotel that we saw earlier, the Legislative Library in Victoria, as well as the Courthouse in Vancouver, which is now the Vancouver Art Gallery. Next to the Royal BC Museum is Thunderbird Park. The park is home to a number of First Nations totems. The original totems were put here in 1940 as part of an effort to preserve some of the region's deteriorating First Nations art. Since then, all of the original poles have been replaced with newer recreations, but some of the original poles are now preserved within the Royal BC Museum. A couple other buildings on the property are the St. Anne's Schoolhouse, built in 1844, and the Helmken House, built in 1852 by Dr. John Helmken. Sitting along the waterfront is a plaza dedicated to the 100th anniversary of the Canadian Navy. In addition to a memorial, you'll find a bronze sculpture called the Homecoming by local artist Nathan Scott, which depicts a Canadian sailor reuniting with his daughter after returning home from deployment. And just across the plaza, you'll see another sculpture by Nathan Scott, the Veteran Sailor. Also overlooking the harbor is the building now in use by the Victoria Information Centre. This was originally built in 1931 as a service station for Imperial Oil. The tower features a 10 million candle Sperry beacon, which was used as a navigational aid for float planes approaching the inner harbor. The beacon was so bright that it could be seen up to 100 kilometers away. Nearby is the Old Victoria Customs House. This was constructed in 1864 and is the oldest federal building of its kind still standing in Western Canada. During the Klondike Gold Rush, this served as the city's custom house and was the primary port of British Columbia before that role was taken over by the Port of Vancouver. Next, let's head over to Victoria's Chinatown, or as the locals like to call it, Chinatown. Victoria's Chinatown is the oldest in Canada and the second oldest in North America behind San Francisco. The decorated gates of harmonious interest mark the entrance to Chinatown on Fisgard Street. And all up and down the street, you can see examples of Asian-inspired architecture, often in the colors of lucky red and gold. Within Chinatown is Fantan Alley. It's 240 feet long and is the narrowest street in Canada. At its narrowest point, it's only 35 inches wide. At one time, the alley was a gambling district, filled with restaurants, shops, and opium dens. Since gambling wasn't legal in the 1910s and 1920s, either end of the alley was closed off with wooden doors and a watchman assigned to protect the gamblers. Some of the nearby buildings even had secret escape routes to let out gamblers in case of raids. These gambling dens reached their height of popularity in the 1940s, but today you can find a unique blend of restaurants and shops tucked away within the alley. I also like the look of this historic sign on the front of the Don Me Seafood Restaurant. This restaurant has existed for over 80 years in Victoria, serving dim sum to its patrons in the heart of Victoria's Chinatown. Another curious alley is the Dragon Alley, which connects Fisgard and Herald Streets. Possibly taking a playful cue from the Harry Potter films, the address of Dragon Alley is 532 and a half. Like many of the alleys in Victoria's Chinatown, it was created when the original structures in the 1800s were replaced by concrete and brick buildings in the early 1900s. Those new buildings maximized the space available on each plot of land, leaving only narrow walkways in between sets of buildings. Hope you enjoyed our wintry tour of some of the sights in downtown Victoria. Until next time, it's time to exit through the gift shop.